able to come back and see this when they can't participate. So I have been fascinated by systemic approaches and constellations in particular for a long time. And when I first encountered constellation work, it was quite amazed. I was impressed. It was this amazing, effective collection of approaches and things I'd seen in other places, but used in such an amazing and effective way that I got kind of obsessed about how does it work? How does it actually work? And how else could I use it? Right? What other things could I do with this amazing tool set and this set of things that I was learning? So over the years, I also was a student of Michael Rinder's, and so I'd been learning about modeling and how to, take apart processes and try to understand the nuts and bolts behind them. So I've been doing that for quite a while with constellation work and trying to figure out how does it work and how can we use it and what else can we do with it. So I've gotten pretty good at adapting parts and pieces of constellation work and applying it in different contexts. And it's kind of like this amazing Tinker Toy set that you can use in different ways to accomplish different goals. So I wanted to share some of the things that I'd learned about that, give you maybe some ideas of things that you could try for yourself. Some of you are new to constellation work. You'll get a little tiny introduction to it. Some of you have been in the field maybe as long as I have, and are maybe wanting to play with it. And some of you are working in organizations or with nonprofits or your church group or another group, and you'd like to use it there and have found that the kind of traditional workshop setting is a little hard to adapt when people are wearing business suits. So we'll be looking at ways that you can use parts and pieces of constellation work and get some of the effects that you're trying to achieve. So I have a little slide show that I prepared, and here's what I'd like to ask you. I would like you to think of a situation in which you would like to use something from constellation work. Like maybe you can't go in there with a group of representatives and do the whole workshop thing, but there's maybe a situation that you've got in front of you, or maybe you've been in an organization or been in a situation where you wished people would do systemic things rather than the usual finger pointing, right? So I want you to think of a specific example where you would like to see a systemic approach applied. Something you've experienced, a client of yours even, it could even be your family, but you can't go in with the full kind of workshop and representatives and all of that kind of stuff. So I'd love to see thumbs up or just a sign if you've got something. Some folks have a real case study for yourself, a real situation that you'd like to do this with. And at the end of the webinar, I'd like to check in and hear if you found something here that might have sparked something for you in terms of like what you could do with this. So without further ado, let's go look at what's inside the box here. So let's see, let me get this going here. I've got another window open. So you can all see my lovely screen, I hope. Everyone can see that? Okay. So as I've asked, I want you to think of a specific situation where you would want to use something of constellation work. And then we'll see what you can find here that's useful to you. So the first thing I'd ask you to think about is, these are design considerations. And when you are thinking about what you love about systemic tools, what you love about, being able to have a different look rather than looking at the individual, looking at how does this work as a system, I want you to think about what your goals are. There's two different ways that we can kind of use these tools. I mean, there's more, but two main ways. One, these tools, the approach lends itself very nicely to exploration, to kind of design forward methods where we have a question, we're not quite sure what the answer is, or we want to explore something. There's a lot of great ways that we can do that with this work. We can also go from an outcome. Maybe a team is having a problem. or maybe we have a new initiative that's coming in, or we're reorganizing, and we can see how is that going to work. We can kind of pressure test ideas. So we can kind of design backwards from what we want to, see what the gap is and what we have to do. So we have kind of two directions that I'm just using as ways to think about how we can apply constellation work. Design forward, we're exploring. Design backwards, we have an outcome, we're trying to see what will happen. Anytime you're doing an experiment inside an organization, if you're brought in as a consultant or a coach, or even if you're an inside consultant, sometimes that's more risky, it's really important to get permission from the people involved, particularly if you're working in a setting where there's a management team, to make sure that you have buy-in. One thing about these tools is you can't always control where they're going to go. So stuff can show up, and preparing a group that, we don't know exactly what's going to surface is really important. And then, of course, being able to do things that create safety in the group. And that would be a whole nother webinar, but those are things you really need to keep in mind when you start to use these kinds of tools. So here is a quick and dirty explanation of the constellation process. And this I created for a chapter in this group. It's called the Collaborative Change Global Library. Nexus for Change is their website. And they have this amazing collection of change work tools. So constellations are in there as a modality. And I was honored to write the chapter. So usually the constellation process, the way most of us meet it, is in a workshop setting. So somebody invites us to a workshop, or we have a problem, we find out about it, we go. But there's an impulse. Something's bothering us, or there's something we want, or we have a question. And that brings us to the constellation workshop. We sit down with a facilitator. There's a whole art to the inquiry that happens there. And then this is kind of where some of the magic starts, for at least most of us. We represent our situation to ourselves. We may do this in a group. We may do this, some of you joined the constellation world in the COVID period and you learned to do it on Zoom. But we do a representation based on body feelings. And then once we have done that, we can begin to play with it. We can begin to explore different possibilities. We may have sentences, we may do work with sentences, we may perform speech acts that do things. And this is kind of these 3 steps here, the 4 steps from 2 to 5, are what we think of as the workshop. And in those steps, there are a lot of really cool tools. There are a lot of really cool things. Then we send our client home. We hope they metabolize the process and make useful meaning out of it. And perhaps an emergent action, their behavior might change with their understanding changing. And then there's some consequences, and then we may start the cycle again. And that's kind of my little mini summary of what a constellation setting looks like. In a workshop, we actually have people that we can place to make an image of what we're feeling in our system, like who's close, who's far, who looks at me, who can I touch, who not. And that gives us actual people to report what it's like to live in our system. We don't always have those options. And of course, in the business world, we rarely have those options. So a lot of people love what they experience in family constellation workshops, but are stuck when it comes to how can I use this in a business setting. And for sure, business settings can definitely benefit. So just to kind of contextualize what we're doing today, the form isn't the work. There's a lot of know-how in the constellation box. We're not even touching today on principles, the guiding principles that have emerged in the work. That's available to us as a whole other area. We're kind of looking today at practices. What are these practical things that we do that we can adapt to different settings? So just focusing in on some of the elements of the practice. We have a whole bunch of things around inquiry and how inquiry can be adapted into organizational settings. I'm going to focus today on a few of these, which are somatic representation and mobility or movement. Sentences, of course, are part of it. I'll be focusing on witnessing, containment, reciprocity, and I'll be focusing on dissociation. So there's a lot more. There's a lot of things in the suite of tools that we have that are useful, but we'll pick 4 today as kind of a place to explore, and think of it as like a chocolate box. It's a sampler of things that are available. So we'll be having a few of the chocolates today. So let me just go here. So the 4 elements that we've chosen, these are kind of cornerstone pieces of the practice itself. And I think probably the biggest stone is the somatic representation of using felt sense to represent our system to ourselves. And I'll explain some of the reasons why that's so powerful. And then we'll be looking at what movement does for us, what it does to be witnessed, and how dissociation, which most people think of as bad, can be quite useful and something we can put to our own purposes. So the first one here, and so be thinking of your situation as we do these. The first one we're thinking about is somatic representation. And I like to say, as human beings, we have kind of 2 ways of knowing. Maybe we have many, but we'll focus on these 2. We use story, which is a more left hemisphere process, to make meaning, to make sense of life. It doesn't mean our stories are true, but they're useful in some ways. They're a way for us to try to understand our lives. We also have a feeling way of understanding our world, and that's a more right hemisphere. The vagus nerve goes mostly right up into the right hemisphere, and that's carrying information from our day-to-day lived experience into the right hemisphere. And this feeling that we build up about my situation, what my work group is like, is my job safe, right? Am I going to get fired? You know that feeling in the pit of your belly when you know something's not right in your work group. That is a result of all of these interactions that happen day by day, that our body is tracking, that don't necessarily make it to our conscious mind. So they don't necessarily show up in our story. But there's another lived story that we attempt to illustrate in constellation work. And that's so useful. That is so useful in organizations, because groups do not know themselves and they do not know what they're doing. And I feel like I could, give you a signed guarantee on that one, right? Because when you're in the thick of it, you can't look at it and you don't know what you're doing. So when we do representation, and we have people do that, not of the story, but of the feeling, we're accessing that day-to-day lived experience that people have from their interactions. And by nature, it's much more systemic because it's based in relationship. So the felt sense is based in these relationships. So how do we use that if we can't actually go in with a bunch of reps? So from a design forward, like an exploration point of view, one way to do that is what I call sims. And these are where I get a group, if I have a group together, I get them to do the thing that they're doing with me as a witness and a facilitator. So as an example, the reason the Coke can is here, and some of you may have heard my Coke can story. I was in a group of consultants, and they had an existing product, and they were trying to bring a new product in, and they were they were at each other's throat. Everybody was arguing, and so finally, I just picked up a Coke can on the empty Coke can on the counter, and I said, "I am your client. Here is a contract. What happens next?" And 3 people jumped out of their chairs to reach for the contract, which obviously wasn't going to work. Right? I wasn't going to give my Coke can to 3 people coming at me. And so it became very clear very quickly where some of the problems were in their organizational structure. And I did that by simulating an actual experience. I was, in a sense, representing to them, using them to make them do the thing that they were having trouble with. And that illustrated the problem. I've done this lots of times in lots of different ways, where I've said, people will be telling you the story, and I say, let's do it. But we're in a different space now. We're thinking about what we're doing. We're looking at how we're doing it. And when we get to dissociation, I'll show you why that's useful. So that's one way that you can do it. Another way we can get people to use their body sense to tell us what's going on, to show us what's going on, is as having people get up in the room and place themselves relative to dimensions. I had a group where they brought in an outside manager, big, expensive outside manager, and it was a fire department. And so they're very bonded as a group, very people-oriented, the team, the executive team. So I put a sign on one side, I said task, and on the other end of the wall, I said people. And I said, okay, show me where you stand. What's more important to you? Where are your values? And of course, the staff stood on the people side, and the new manager stood on the task side. And they all had a good laugh, but now they started to understand where each person was coming from. So those are so simple, so quick, and yet we're using that somatic knowing that people have to help them see themselves, help them understand themselves. You can do this with values. You can do this with new initiatives in a group. There's all kinds of things you can do it with. So that's an explorative way to use the somatic representation. You can also do it designing backwards. It's like, okay, we're trying a new team configuration. Let's have people stand up and stand in those relationships and see if it works. See what happens, right? Or we're bringing in a new, staff member.
Yeah.
So we can actually, test new arrangements. We can also, if we're having trouble, like we have co-managers and they can't sort things out, we can sort out social orders. We can stand people up and say, okay, which way are you facing? Are you both looking at the same thing? Nobody's looking at this. We can make it really apparent what's going on. Just standing people up and embodying what they're doing. Sometimes it even allows us to clean up the power dynamics that are going on because they become visible and we can talk about it and have a conversation that we might not have even known to have. So this is a super powerful set of tools. And just getting people to show you rather than tell you already gets you into this realm. And it is so quick and so simple. I had a fellow who was working in a big health organization, and he just kept a stack of little relationships. These are our little toys. They have a nose and ears on them. You can see the nose, right? They're casino grade poker chips, so they sound like money, which is kind of fun. And he would just keep those on his desk. And when people would come in, he'd say, okay, show me, right on who's who, show me what's going on. And that was an incredible tool for him as a manager to coach his staff because he got that somatic feeling, the lived gut feeling that people had about what was going on. So this is an incredible tool. It's incredibly adaptable. You can use it so many different ways in organizations. And people get it. You don't have to explain it. Just ask them to show you and get them on their feet, and it will start to unfold. And that brings me to the second cool thing that we have in our toolkit, which is movement, mobility. Once we have those people on their feet, or we have objects that we're working with, we've taken things from inside the body where we can't look at it and move it to a form that we can move and rearrange. And here's the thing, when we rearrange those images on the outside with these elements, we're rearranging people's inner experience. As soon as they see that, they get a different feeling. As soon as we rearrange their inner experience, new possibilities show up, and those generate new potential for behavior. So as soon as I have a little example here. These are using relationships, right? So I have a director here, that's what DEAR stands for, who's facing the board, and I have a staff that's facing the clients who are looking at the project, who's looking at the staff. Now, if you're in organizations at all, we have problems, right? Because this is not a coherent team. Everybody's looking in different directions. It's not going to work well. So the first thing I did in this case, and I said to the director, I said, what would you need to be able to look at your staff? What do you need to relieve the tension with the board? And there was some things that we did. So I was able to move the director and turn them around to face the staff. As soon as I moved the director, the staff was aware that somebody was paying attention to them for once, right? They suddenly mattered, and they turned around too, which made it possible for the director and the staff to work together to work on a project to benefit the clients. So the ability to move the elements that you place. So often we're working on a flip chart, or we're working on PowerPoints, or we're working on things that don't move. By going to a three-dimensional representation of some kind, you have this ability to move things. So you can explore different team organizations, like, okay, how else could we do this? But you can have the team get out there and try different things. Do we need some resources? You can add them, take them out, put them in. What would be our first step towards this goal? You know, it's also really cool as a coaching tool, as an interview tool, to have some little objects or just post-it notes and say, okay, show me what's going on. Let's just put a nose here and you show me which way things are going. So easy. You don't have to explain this. Just do it. People have an innate felt sense of where they stand in relationship. They can do it. You can also use this in reverse order. You can start with your desired thing, set it up, and see if it doesn't work. You can move. You can add in, eliminate elements. You can just work with it from that point. So you can work from an outcome backwards towards like, okay, if we set this up, what are the problems? How do we change it? So it's really, these two tools here are really cool. And like I say, they're easily extractable from the workshop format. They're easily adaptable to fit different contexts. As soon as you go to somatic experience, you get this whole other layer of information, and it is so helpful. So I hope that I've encouraged you to start playing around and just saying to people, stand up and show me. What does that look like? Because the story I heard from Jakob Schneider, who was with Bert Hellinger when he first started doing this, he was in the room. I said, well, how did Bert get going? And he said one day a fellow was telling a story of his family, and Bert just finally said to the guy, show me. I don't get it. Show me. Grab some people and show me how this works. And that really was the beginning of Constellation work as it continued to evolve. But that simple thing of show me takes you into a different dimension. And it's so easy and so useful. So I hope you're all thinking of ways to get your groups to show you what's going on and all the things you can do with that. The third thing that I want to share today is safe witnessing. One of the things that happens in workshops settings that is so powerful is we have safe, non-judgmental, people are not judging us, we're all human. We have this safe witnessing. And it's essential for us as human beings. We're social primates. We need social connection and validation. And being witnessed provides containment and regulation. It helps us regulate difficult things when we're witnessed and held. So safe witnessing also gives us a chance to get our story out and to be able to reflect on it. So it's a little trickier you have to know your client, you have to know that there's enough safety in the room to do this. But often after we've done the somatic process, it's important to sit down and talk about it. It's important to share our experiences and to create enough safety that the group can do that. This helps an awful lot in terms of integration. It also allows groups to regulate. I'm very early in my teaching career in the organizational side. I had a group that was tearing every teacher apart. They were, fortunately it wasn't just me, because I was one of the first ones in, and I was like, my gosh, what is it with this group? They went after Gunhard Faber, they went after everybody that walked in the room. And so I got really curious and I had some time off, so I went in and started listening to them. I just started talking and witnessing and listening. I didn't try to do anything, I just listened. And what I realized is that I had a split group. Half of the group wanted to learn by doing things themselves. half of the group wanted to learn by watching a teacher, and they couldn't agree. So I had them again on the last day. So I had in this 7-day program, I had a big motivation to make it work. So I split the group at the end. I sent half off to do it themselves, and I had half watch me, and they were so happy because I'd witnessed them and I'd let them do what they wanted to do. So this idea of witnessing is super powerful. I will say safety first. We have to make sure that it's a safe environment. But it allows group to digest somatic experiences, especially if you're talking about values or organizations. It will expose to you, if you are a consultant, the actual networks of trust. And that's Karen Stevenson's work, how people really turn to each other and who they really go to do things. And it allows a group to collectively change a story, which when we're working in business teams and we're working in organizations, nonprofits, it's really important that we change our story together. So it's really important. From a backwards design, from an outcome, it allows you to pressure test, like what would happen if we did this, set up what you think you want, see how people feel in it, allow them to sit down and share from those experiences, to share what that's like. So there's a lot that we can gain from being able to create the safe witnessing that we experience in the Constellation workshop. And finally, this number should say 4. I think I can change it. Nope, I can't. But finally, dissociation is actually quite useful. We always think of dissociation as bad, like, you're not here, you've left, you're dissociated from trauma, or you're daydreaming or whatever. But we actually deliberately dissociate our clients when we have them set up a constellation. We are deliberately getting them to look at themselves in their situation rather from within the experience. And that ability to step out and look at what we're doing, at ourselves in an experience, in a situation, is the beginning of allowing us to reassess what we're doing, to see ourselves differently. And it allows insight to emerge. This is what allows us to start to think about things differently. So this little move that we do, which is really so brilliant in Constellation, where we say, choose a representative for yourself. Now, suddenly there's 2 of you in the room, right? And you're able to look at yourself and at yourself in the system. So you can see and understand things a lot differently from that point of view. So just to give a few illustrations here, I'm using a map as an example of that. When you get somebody to step back and look at themselves, you can use this. I use this a lot of times as an interview tool. I'll say, show me show me what's going on. Set that up for me. And then I'll ask the questions like, what happens when you see yourself in this situation? Or from this perspective, what would you advise that person, that other you that's in the system? You're out here with me and there's another you in the system. What would you advise that person to do? And then it's a different way of thinking about things. And you can also identify triangles, triangulation, competing teams, all kinds of dynamics become visible that you can work with your clients or your team to help them see. Like, oh, how does that little triangle keep going? You go here, they go there, and how does that go? Designing backwards, if you have a set outcome, you can say, okay, step back. If you're here, there's you in your thing, right? Now step back over here with me and tell me what would be needed for this. If someone was in your position, what would they need to do in order to? So it's this idea that we're actually dissociating people, we're making them step back. We have 2 of you on the floor, so to speak, that allows us to get the insights, that a lot of the insights that we gain. So it's a really powerful thing that we just sort of do, like choose someone to represent yourself. But we can use that ability to get people to step back and see themselves or see their team, and be deliberate about that. And it's an incredibly powerful technique. That's just, so this is our chocolate box. This is a very brief, well, half-hour webinar and then some time for questions and conversation. So in summary, the form isn't the work. You know, a workshop, constellations are not this workshop setting. They're much more than that. There's lots of possibilities just with the practices, let alone principles. Principles can be adapted to. It's really helpful if you know which way you're going, what you're trying to do with your design. Forward, backward are two options. We looked at 4 adaptable elements: somatic representation, making felt sense visible; movement, where we can try out different configurations; safe witnessing, creating support, connection, encouraging reflection and integration; and dissociation, looking at rather than from within. And there's more things you could do. So it's an amazingly juicy toolkit, if you will. For those of you that want to dive deep, I welcome you to come to see me in July 18th, I think it is, in Portland. We are going to put stuff on the floor and take real cases and really play with the constellation work in as many different ways as we can think of, and you'll get more of these kinds of insights and get your hands on the tools. And then we have a little workshop. One of my I don't know, I guess you could say I have a little campaign to get people to use imaginative elements effectively. I see a lot of cause and effects being mixed up, and there's ways of using things like values or things like that effectively, and there's ways that just kind of, or something happens, but it's a lot more work than it needs to be. So I have a little workshop on using imaginative elements effectively. And these are things that oftentimes are a little more neutral, so they're useful to use in organizations. You don't necessarily have people. You can use them in coaching and use them in team coaching as well. So that's the quickie tour of a few things, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I would love to hear from a few of you if what are you trying to do, and how can we adapt this approach to a situation that you actually have. So maybe somebody would stick up a hand and let me know, like, I've got a group, or I've got a client, and here's what I'm thinking. So yeah, does anyone have something for us to play with? Yes, I see you, Sarah. I'm gonna spotlight you and me here. Yeah, let's see if I can add.
I just have to unspot. Oh, there you go. That's better. I'm not looking at myself now.
Yeah, no, that's kind of daunting. All right. Yeah. So what's on your mind?
Well, thank you very much for this. This is really helpful. I love the systematic breakdown and all the clarity of the structures. I didn't realize it was going to be organizationally constellation focused, and that's not really my world. I'm a teacher.
Oh,
and
great, even
I'm
better.
a death doula, and I teach death doulas.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm interested in looking for tools.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even know if I have a question. I just thought I put my hand up.
So sure, no. So if I was trying to teach people who are doing something, so I mean, they're in the middle of the family constellation. When you're a death doula, you're in the middle of it, right?
Well, and that's actually the project I'm working on teaching now is not actually that. I mean, that's one part of it. It's a back step forward. It's a step before that in terms of what's their relationship to this work and their relationship to death, their relationship to their sensitivities, because often they're incredibly sensitive, but they don't know how to manage those sensitivities.
Right. Yeah.
And they need to sort of figure out how to manage them and then figure out how to use them functionally.
Right. So I think I would be I would set them up a lot. I mean, so one of the things for folks like that is the ability to dissociate. All right. Because in the middle of things, you need to be able to step out and have a look at yourself and a look at your group and say, whoever you're dealing with, what's going on? Am I okay? First question, right? Am I okay? Do I need anything so that I can be here for them? So getting people to step back and like setting up, like, this is you, here's the thing you're doing. What do you need? What are you bringing? Who's with you? What stories are behind you? Let's put your dead grandmother in here and see how that's shaping the way that you're responding to your client, right? I would be just putting it up and putting it up and putting it up until we've looked at every possibility, right? So they can look at, so they're looking at someone is there for them, and they are seeing grandma, and they're seeing how that's, how that's shaping. And the other reason I would say that is because these are sensitive folks, and dissociation in this way is not bad. It's useful. It's right. You drop in and get our sensitive reading on the room, right? But then we can step out and think about it, look at it. And that can preserve your batteries too, if you're.
Yeah, that's the thing, that they're all getting burnt out. How would you do that? Just practically, say there's 25 people in a workshop, and this is a question that each person really wants to address. I mean, we could do it as a kind of constellation where we work one person's story and everyone
Small
learns
groups.
that. But how could we do it so that each,
Yeah.
it's like just the pragmatics of it, it's small groups.
So
they're doing it
25,
together,
split them into fives.
and then do one at a time.
Yeah, so then they can work in small groups. I'd do small groups because I'd say, okay, here you are. What is the worst client that you could have? Like, what's the one that would really unnerve you? Right? You can do this in so many, like, what's the worst, fill in the blank, whether it's a business thing or something else. What's the worst, right? Put it there. Okay. Have your representative there. Take a look at that. How are you setting that up? Are you even able to look at them? Right? Oh, well, that's helpful. Are you backing up across the room? What are you doing? Right? And then, what would you need? Who is speaking? What is the trigger for you? What is this triggering in you? I mean, I did this in business constellations too, I have to say. I wouldn't name them, but I would watch like I had a case where I had a business leader, and he'd hired this assistant, and the assistant was bigger and more important than he was, and he was like kind of hiding it. The team was really fed up with him, right? And I said, I just put somebody behind him. He says, Dad, of course I'm thinking, right? Just put that person behind. And said, just imagine you had some real backing, right? And he stood up straight, and the assistant backed off, and the team settled down. I mean, it was simple. It was simple, but I'm just, you're looking at the need. You don't even have to name things. Like, what would you need? Who would support you, right? There's so much stuff that comes up. So we're using two things here. We're dissociating the person because we want them to look at it. We want them to understand themselves. And we're setting up scenarios, and we're moving them around so they can play with them. And they can and then we're providing witness. So even these four elements are incredibly powerful. Okay?
Thank you very much. That's great.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
So experiment. Let me know how it goes. Okay. Thanks, Sarah. I will remove your pin. I see Jamie's hand up right now. And there may be other hands up here that I can't see. But I'm going to let Jamie come in here. Let's see here. There we go. Yeah, spotlight. There you
Me?
go. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, hi.
This was very, very good. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a kind of a question. So we have a very small town with two arts organizations that are in a big divide. One was an art league, and then a little gallery that became sort of their child. And then some very big personalities came into play, and it exploded, and they divided. So now it's sort of like rippling out across the community, these very bad feelings, and it's such a small community. And I was trying to think of, I don't think they would come to the table together, but I'm just curious what your take would be on maybe how to heal that divide.
Yeah, it's kind of a big one, but what I would, you could use all of these things as a coaching tool. So you could sit down with one party and say, set it all up and say, yes, I know you have a story about how bad those other guys are. But if we look at this, scenario, like you could use things like little post-it notes or whatever. If we look at this scenario, what was your part in that? What was your part in that? Right?
I'm really tempted to just offer that because I can see so much, but maybe go individually to the table with them and just work representationally.
Yeah, just working both sides until they start to get a bigger story. rather
Yeah,
than a story of you're the bad guy, right?
yeah.
This,
And it would be so, I don't know, it just seems important in a small town not to have the artistic community
yeah.
split, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Right.
Yeah.
And I think once you've, this is the other thing about witnessing is once you've witnessed and held their story, um, so that they're not focused on that so much, then you can begin to say, well, let's see, how did we get here? What happened?
Hmm.
Beginning to set it up and use whatever you've got around, or even objects in the room. And
Right.
then we can start to ask questions, right?
I think that would be a brave move on my part,
It
would be
would
to
be.
offer each one.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. But I mean, if you really go in with the genuine, like, you know,
yeah, I could
I
do
just
that.
want to understand. I just want to understand.
That's, yeah, that's where I'm at. It just doesn't make sense to me, you know?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Good luck. Sure. I hope it works. Yes, I think we have maybe a few minutes for one more. Oh, there's one more hand up here. Um, and I'd love to see in the chat if you've gotten some ideas that might inspire you as you're thinking about that. I don't see another hand up here, so I'm gonna just, okay. So I'd love to see from those of you who had an idea of what you might want to do this with. Just maybe a comment, if you want to make a comment, just like you have a new idea and want to share that, that would be great. Otherwise, you can put something in the chat and, just share what you might be doing with this, how you might use these four elements of constellation work in your own setting. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. We've got like 2 minutes left, so I'd be happy to just pop open your mic if you've got a question or comment. I would love to hear it. And just pop in. Let me know what you're thinking. Yeah. So, okay. Um,
I have a quick question,
yeah,
Jane.
sure.
First of all, it's so nice to see you.
Yeah. And who is this? And I'm looking for you.
It's Liz Solomon.
Oh, hi, Liz. Yeah. What's your question? Yeah.
Hi. My question was like working with coaching clients in organizational settings where the problems have been named or identified,
Mm-hmm.
and then struggling with this question of like what is actually the developmental edge of the client and what is
Mm-hmm.
actually a mismatch with the culture. And I'm just
Uh-huh.
curious, when you sit with that question, what are some of your
Uh-huh.
kind of go-to tools?
Well, it depends. I mean, yeah, sometimes what we think of as culture problems are actually structural problems that have been cooked into the organization. They have to do with power dynamics and history and so on. I'm sure you know that. So sometimes it's helpful to identify where the person, like put up whatever is sticky for them, and like just simply representing where, what's working for you, what's not working for you, just even two objects. And where are your allies in this? Where are you having conflicts? And where do you stand in that? I mean, we're just trying to get, like I say, a little dissociation and an ability for them to look at themselves and be able to start to name, there's something, I think it has to do with the way we work as human beings, but there's something about putting an object on the table
Yeah.
that lets people name things more easily than if you're talking, right?
Yeah.
If I say, here's what's good for me about the culture, we are pretty generous with whether you're in the office or not. Here's what's not working for me with the culture, and often that will turn out to be a person, persons, right? That's often what's behind that. So, but if you put the object on the table like that and say, well, what's not working? First comes the story of like, well, people can get really uptight about not making it to meetings, or I'm making something up, right? Whatever it is. Like, well, who's, you know what I mean? Who specifically? Now you start to get things that have been kind of under the table flushed out. And it's simply putting something out there. It changes the way people think and see. So it's really helpful. And it's like, and then you can explore, like, is that a problem that you have? Are you having difficulty negotiating with this person? Do you need some skills? Or is this just fundamentally not a place that matches your values?
Yeah.
You know, your values are out of alignment here.
Yeah.
So that can just foster a different kind of conversation. Just by, and this is why I like things like relationships or things that I put in people's hands, because as soon as I activate the haptic nervous system, the hand nervous system, which has a lot of brain energy attributed, I'm activating that somatic stuff for them. I'm getting access to a different set of resources. So from a coaching perspective, it's really, really helpful. It gets them out of that story. Right. Yeah. And it's kind of fun to see what comes up. Right. Especially since a lot of this stuff really comes down to interpersonal stuff. Yeah. At the end of the day. Yeah. Great question. Yeah. Thanks, Liz. Good to see you. Yeah. Yeah. All right. I'm going to remove the spotlight there. Okay. So I think I've used up all my time. I think I said 45 minutes. So I've completed that, and some of you need to get back to work. Really enjoyed sharing this with you. I hope I inspired you to get creative with constellation work and play with it, and not be just too precious with it, but be willing to experiment. And I hope to see you again. So maybe at our masterclass or maybe at our workshop. Take care, and we'll see you again. We'll have another one of these little webinars in August. So if you're on our mailing list, you'll get the announcement for that one as well. All right, take care, everybody. Thank you. Bye.